Peace, and welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we spend about 15 minutes exploring a page from the Quran together and seeing how we can apply the verses to our lives. Hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, mind, and soul. So today we'll be reading from chapter 7, the elevations, from verses 131 to 137. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge to God from the accursed devil. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. فَإِذَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْحَسَنَةُ قَالُوا لَنَا هَذِهِ وَإِن تُصِيبُهُمْ سَيِّئَةٌ يَطَّيَّرُوا بِمُوسَى وَمَنْ مَعَهُ أَلَا إِنَّمَا طَائِرَهُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. When something good came their way, they say, this is ours. When something bad happens to them, they blame Moses and those with him. In fact, their blame is with God, but most of them do not know. وقالوا مهما تأتينا به من آية لتسحرنا بها فما نحن لك بمؤمنين. And they said, no matter what sign you bring to us to bewitch us with it, we will not believe in you. فأرسلنا عليهم الطوافان والجراد والقمل والضفادع والدم آيات مفصلات فاستكبروا وكانوا قوما مجرمين. So we let loose upon them the flood and the locust and the lice and the frog and the blood, all explicit signs, but they were too arrogant. They were a sinful people. ولما وقع عليهم الرجز قالوا يا موسى ادع لنا ربك بما عهد عندك لئن كشفت عنا الرجز لنؤمنن لك ولنرسلن معك بني إسرائيل. Whenever a plague befell them, they would say, O Moses, pray to your Lord for us according to the covenant he made with you. If you lift the plague from us, we will believe in you and let the children of Israel go with you. فلما كشفنا عنهم الرجز إلى أجل هم بالغوه إذا هم ينكثون. But when we lift the plague from them, for a term they were to fulfill, they broke their promise. فانتقمنا منهم فأغرقناهم في اليم بأنهم كذبوا بآياتنا وكانوا عنها غافلين. So we took vengeance on them and drowned them in the sea because they rejected our signs and paid no heed to them. وأورثنا القوم الذين كانوا يستضعفون مشارق الأرض ومغاربها التي باركنا فيها وتمت كلمة ربك الحسنى على بني إسرائيل بما صبروا ودمرنا ما كان يصنع فرعون وقومه وما كانوا يعرشون. And we made the oppressed people inherit the eastern and western parts of the land which we had blessed. Thus the fair promise of your Lord to the children of Israel was fulfilled because of their endurance, and we destroyed what Pharaoh and his people had built and what they had harvested. Sadaqallah al-Azim. God the Great said the truth. Now the verses here are telling us the finale between what happened between Pharaoh and Moses. Here we learn that the criminals, the people that do not believe in God, when something good happens in their way, what they usually think is that it was from their own will or their own selves. This is something that they've done, and therefore it's supposed to be for them because of who they are. They don't really thank God, and they really think that they were the ones in control. But when something bad happened to them, they kept blaming Moses and his people that things are not working our way. It's because of you and your people. Yeah, God is saying that it's actually because of him. Because of these people being oppressive, God closes certain doors on them, and so that they would have to taste a little bit of the punishment lest they ponder and come back to the truth. This is one of the signature ways that God has presented himself to the oppressors, where he lets them taste a little bit of the punishment so that they would think and maybe make a change. But we see a lot of them, they start to become a little bit more arrogant, and they see it as a competition between them and the messenger. That it's almost as if like the messenger is trying to control them, and yet they want to control the messenger. They take it in a way where they're argumentative and they're fighting. They don't really consider God in here, but rather they're considering ideologies. And the weird part is, and the unfortunate part, is that these people are following a devilish way of understanding the life. And yes, they are always confronted with other demonic and devilish ways of approaching life. It's like these worldviews that we constantly have, like American capitalism or American democracy versus the Soviet style of communism, or currently the Russian way of capitalism. And they're always going head to head in regards to what they think the world should be run or how the world should be run. But when it comes down to God, it's not competing with their political ideologies or the way that they want to run their society, but rather it's a warning that this is the only entity that can really remove you and destroy you and make you feel like you have not even existed. And this is exactly what is said at the end, where we see that God has approached what Pharaoh and his people were doing, and he made it seem like they never even lived in the land. And he gave the land to someone else, someone who was weak and oppressed. So we see as well consistently in the history that there's always these people that they vilify a certain group of people and they put them down, and then they start to have this propaganda against them, and so that people would not consider them as human beings. So they start using really bad terminology like human waste or people who are terrorists or certain terms, and so that the other side, the people that they're propagating it to, that they would start to hate these people and then they start to oppress them. This happened in World War II. It's happening currently to certain types of people, and it's a way to commit genocide. It's just so that people would accept this kind of monstrosity and these crimes. This propaganda usually starts at an early age, and it starts to be pushed into these communities and societies in a way that is unacceptable. So for them, they think that Moses is also trying to vilify them and make them people who are monstrous, even though they're the ones who are monsters. And at the end of the day, the person that really, the entity that really can solve this is God. And Moses was promoting the ideology of believing on God, believing in the last day, to constantly warning them. But they just kept choosing to destroy and hurt and deny. And because it was a competition, they said that no matter what you bring to us, we will not believe. And thus they challenged God again. But then God has sent them many signs, including floods, locusts, lice, and frogs, and blood. All of these are very clear signs that it's not possible that a human being can actually produce this. This is no longer a magic. This is natural events and consequences that are occurring right there in front of you. God has listed to us here, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs, and including the other 2 signs, which is when Moses put their hand in his hand and it became white, and then the serpent, that's 7 signs. God tells us in the Quran that he has sent them 9 signs. We know one more, which he's listed now, that then the plague befell them. There was another plague. So that's now the 8th sign. And as God says that they have one more sign for them to truly believe. And it was when Moses split the ocean and they were drowned. Or the sea, and they were drowned. Pharaoh has clearly recognized that that's a sign. The sea has split for this people to walk through. And that was his final sign before him really transgressing and going again, trying to kill the children of Israel. But when the plague did hit them, sign number 8, they lost their challenge. When they said that no matter what you do, we would not believe in you, they said, you know what? We do believe in you, because this plague is a little too much. So tell your Lord that we will allow you to get what you want, which is to leave with the children of Israel, and we will let you go. But remove this plague from us if your Lord would fulfill his part of the covenant. And they did that. They allowed the children of Israel to go, and God did lift the plague, and the covenant should have been completed. But notice how here the children of Israel were not trying to take over Pharaoh or live alongside with Pharaoh, but they just wanted to leave. And this is the best option for some believers sometimes. Yes, there's so much resistance in the world and there's so much hate in the world. Sometimes it's good to just leave and let God to deal with it, instead of you trying to really change the system or to trying to take control. So here, God wanted Moses and his people to leave, but Pharaoh accepted, and then guess what? He broke his promise, as most disbelievers will end up doing, because to him it seemed like a loss, that the God of Moses got what he wanted. The Lord of Moses, he pressured Pharaoh hard enough and strong enough in a way where Moses was allowed to get what he wanted. And that's not something that Pharaoh liked. And therefore he followed them and wanted them unalived or killed. And what ends up happening is that Pharaoh sees his last sign and he is drowned. And this is where God is telling us that this is what happens with these people that constantly reject the signs. That no matter what God shows to them, and however God is treating them, and God was treating them, even though they are very oppressive and very guilty, God still showed them certain signs in where he was being gracious with them, and he was being clement with them and very forbearing. God could have easily eliminated them without even sending Moses. But God has given them ample chances, specifically 9 very big chances, for them to truly stop and to continue on with the society that they did. All they had to reflect is to realize the blessings that God has given them, and for them not to think that they were in control, but rather they were just people who are extremely blessed from what God has given them. And these are verses that are going to be presented later, that these people literally left all these blessings just to go chase people to kill them. And in the end, they were the ones who died and drowned. And now the thing is that is very interesting, and this is the hope and the dream for many believers in this day and age, because we could see how much corruptions and problems there are in the world. What we would love to do is to be the people who inherit the world after these people. Because right now, as a group of believers that truly pioneer what God has said, and they quote the verses of God, and they want to live by what God has said, and they want to push people to learn about the mercy and the love of God, they're usually the people who are getting persecuted from every side, from disbelievers, atheists, from people who are in government levels that do not want the truth to be spread. And at the same time, people who say that they believe in God, they tend to sit and try to push us down. People who say that the book of God is sufficient. But God has given us many promises, and these promises are going to come to pass, whether it's for us or for the generations that come after us, that we will eventually be the ones who will inherit the earth, whether in this creation or whether in the next creation, because God has promised his believers heaven. So the promise of God is going to come. It's just we have to be patient. And this is what is one of the verses that is going to, one of the verses that was presented today is that the words of God have been fulfilled in goodness on the children of Israel in what they endured and the patience that they've shown. This world is very extremely temporary and it's going to be very short lived. But we do have to practice this patience and endurance and try to talk to people in a way that is befitting to a human talking to another human and how God taught us to talk. It gets extremely frustrating at times, and we are sometimes put in a very difficult position and a lot of pressure where people are trying to almost push you to lose your religion. And remember, we do have a common enemy, and this enemy is the devil, Satan, because he rejected a human being better than him. And it was satanic ideas and these ideas that have been presented to Pharaoh to put Pharaoh where he is. It was easy for someone to say to Pharaoh that, hey, you might be a god, and him accepting that. And that seed gets put in his head and he starts to grow in that way. And he gets to a point where it's almost embarrassing for him to admit that he's not a god. And yet he has been shown countless times that he truly isn't a god. But notice the signs that have been given to such a god or a deity where he wasn't even able to lift any of them. And they were not gracious signs per se, but they are very exemplary signs. You had the blood, you had locusts, you had a flood, you had a plague, you had you had lice, all things that are destructive, reminding this man, this weak man, that the power of destruction isn't within your hands, that any of these signs could have been the end of it. But this man just truly would not believe, thinking that he would get by. And this is something that we have to reflect upon and think about when it comes down to disbelievers. They think that they have some sort of resilience. They think that they're capable of enduring because of how history usually presents itself. People had a tough time at certain times and then they endured and they went on. But what ends up happening is there's some times where your resilience is not going to be good enough. And when you are presented with your death and the certainty of death, at that point you are ready to bargain and you're ready to accept the truth, and so that you would get back to doing what you were doing. And then you're going to sit and think that you're going to be a better person. But God tells us about these individuals that if they were given the time, they would go back doing what they were doing. They forget these lessons. And I guarantee you they would start being arrogant again, denying the signs again. It's because they have stepped into that darkness, into that way of thinking where it starts to overcome them. It's very difficult for a believer to really encompass that way of thinking because it's something that where you have to experience and walk that path consistently until you destroy yourself to a point that it's almost certainty of there is no return. But God is telling us in the Quran that there is a return, that they truly had a chance for them to make a difference. But it was their psychology that stopped them. As I said, I believe in a previous episode, I truly believe Iblis, if he does the right thing today, that he would have a chance to get back and repent to God and fight the right words to say. But what we consistently know and what we consistently see is that he's actively choosing to reject. Because I truly believe in these disbelievers that the thing that they fear the most is the embarrassment of how they're wrong, rather than the embarrassment of them that they're going to receive when they go into hell, and the punishment that they're going to have to withstand and what they have to endure because of them not wanting to be humiliated. It's very interesting how what the disbeliever fears most is what God presents to them and what he gives them It is just because these people don't love God and they do not want God to be the highest authority. Yet God is the highest authority. And that form of rejection, that form of denial is the most stupidest way anyone can ever approach anything. It's a very clear truth, yet you're choosing to think that you have a better way of approaching it. But the entity that you're fighting or the entity that you're trying to prove wrong isn't another human being, or it's not an angel and it's not a demon, but rather it's your God, the Lord who created this 7 heavens, these 7 skies that we have in this land, the one that knows everything and every atom and where it belongs and where it acts and where it should be. But trying to challenge that is going to be something that is very rough. And God tries to redeem them, and he can redeem them if he wants. He sends them enough signs for them to actively make that decision, but they choose to stay who they are, and they're going to have to stand for their punishment. And these are just signs for the believers to know that they should just endure and that God is truly on their side. I believe that those 9 signs that were sent to Pharaoh and his people, it was God wanting to redeem these people. But these people chose hell. Those people chose evil. And those people chose the path that they chose. And with that said, I hope you guys are enjoying these. All praise to our Lord, the Lord of the worlds, and peace be upon you.